Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the content patch for the 7th of May 2013. My name is TotalBiscuit with today's gaming news and comment. Coming up in the show, EA has signed a multi-year deal with Disney to develop Star Wars titles, and EA announces The Sims 4 with no always-on requirements. All this and the OC Remix track of the day coming up right about now. EA announced today that they'd signed a multi-year Star Wars agreement with Walt Disney to develop Star Wars titles using the Frostbite engine. The statement also claims that this is an exclusive licensing agreement, which means that we will not be seeing titles from non-EA developers, although there's nothing, of course, to stop EA from publishing a title that was developed by a third party, as they have been known to do from time to time. EA specifically stated that they will be publishing and developing new Star Wars titles for a core gaming audience, as well as spanning all interactive platforms and the most popular gaming genres. They also stated that Disney retains the rights to develop titles within mobile, social, tablet, and online game categories. Well, this is fairly good news in and of itself, isn't it? Before we go on with the rest of the statement, let's just point that out. It's a case of giving the license to a company, but only to make actual video games, not cow clickers. So, if you want to play Hothville, you'll have to do it when Disney develops the game rather than allowing EA to do it. Thank God for that. Now, it would appear that DICE, BioWare, and Visceral will be developing titles under this particular agreement, and they will all be using the Frostbite engine, which is, of course, the engine that EA is pretty much using for every core game up to this point. Not a bad choice either, of course, as we are well aware Frostbite is a nice engine indeed. Alright. Okay, so let's get into this one, shall we? I think that what people thought immediately upon hearing this was, oh god, why? But in reality, let's just look a little bit further at this. So I think I'm one of the minority. I don't necessarily think that it's a small minority, but needless to say, a minority that said that shutting down LucasArts was not actually the worst thing in the world. It was a little unfortunate that it happened because we were hoping that LucasArts would come back into its own with Star Wars 1313. However, what we also knew, and what was pretty much proven, is that LucasArts actually hasn't developed a good Star Wars game since Republic Commando. Yeah, so that's a long, long time ago. And as a direct result, my response to that was to say, look, losing LucasArts doesn't mean we lose good Star Wars games, and you've got to take off those rose-tinted spectacles because LucasArts was a shadow of its former self when it was shut down. Now, you then look at EA and you say, oh god, no, EA. The worst company in America, 2 years running, the most maniacal publisher right now, at least according to the majority of people. God knows when that happened. Activision used to be the big evil, apparently not anymore. They now have control of the Star Wars license. Oh god. Is it really that bad? It's a good question. Here's the thing. This is a multifaceted issue. You can't just say, this good, this bad, and claim that's analysis, because that's lazy and dumb. So, look at the companies that are responsible for these new titles. So, under EA, you have these three named development houses. DICE, Visceral, and BioWare. Okay. So, what have they developed lately? Well, we'll start with DICE. Mostly focused on Battlefield, as you might imagine. For the past 2 years, they've been doing nothing but developing Battlefield titles. So Battlefield 3, all the expansions for it, now working on Battlefield 4 to come out this year. If you like, you can try and blame them for Battlefield Play for free, but a lot of that work was actually done by Easy Studios, who have nothing to do with DICE, really. DICE was in collaboration on this particular title. They were not the guys solely responsible for it. You look at some other stuff, Battlefield Bad Company 2, you also had Medal of Honor. They actually only worked on the multiplayer aspect of that. Danger Close did the single player, so again, if you want to blame them for something bad, you can say, well, the multiplayer wasn't that great, but it certainly wasn't that bad either. Now, if you were to look at the games that only DICE made, then what you see are stuff like Battlefield, Mirror's Edge, Battlefield, Rally Sports Challenge in 2004 on the Xbox. Lord knows what the hell happened there. But DICE do make Battlefield games. What does that put them in the perfect position to do? A Battlefront 3. There's been a lot of stuff buzzing around about that lately. Leaked footage from a couple of years back just came out today that LucasArts was actually working on their own version of Battlefront 3. that also never made release. And let's be honest, Battlefront was one of the most popular Star Wars games ever released. It sold a lot of copies. It did really, really well. At one point, the original Battlefront was the best-selling Star Wars video game of all time. Yeah, I kid ye not. Is there anyone here that wouldn't jump at the chance to see a Battlefront 3 developed by DICE? Just give it to me right now. Hell, you can do 20 DLC expansions, I'll still buy it. I don't know. It's the kind of thing that I think will work really, really well. Let's be totally honest. Let's be completely frank. I think that would be a very exciting thing indeed. Of course, then you look at Visceral. What has Visceral made lately? Let's do a little bit of analysis there. Are they still a good studio? Well, yes, they are. You say what you want about Dead Space 3, even though it wasn't as good a horror game, it was still a pretty good title. They, of course, made the Dead Space series. They also made Dante's Inferno, which makes me think they really shouldn't do another Force Unleashed, because Dante's Inferno wasn't that great, even though the art design was pretty cool. They made the Simpsons game, they made Godfather game, they made a couple of Lord of the Rings games as well. They weren't too bad, actually. Return of the King was a really great game, and Third Age was surprisingly enjoyable. So Visceral actually has a pretty good history there. And then you got BioWare. BioWare, a little bit of an enigma, of course. They developed Knights of the Old Republic, which was fantastic. Then they developed the Old Republic, which wasn't so fantastic. They have had a mixed history in that regard, but they also made Mass Effect, which is great, and Dragon Age, which is great, and Dragon Age 2, which wasn't quite as great. In fact, it wasn't all that good at all. They also made Sonic Chronicles, The Dark Brotherhood. Yeah. It's, you know, they have an interesting history, let's be totally honest there. Are they completely capable of making another Star Wars game that doesn't suck? Absolutely. Could they maybe even handle something like 1313, which was the third-person shooter anyway? Yeah, certainly. But who knows if 1313 will actually come out at this stage. So development houses-wise, you actually have a really strong lineup there. A lot of potential. However, while you can say that that's a good thing, you've got to then look at EA's business model. What will they do with it? They're developing games for core gamers. What does that mean, exactly? You need to tell me. I need to know. Because what I've seen lately, when it comes to catering to core gamers, is nonsense. Complete and total nonsense. EA has fallen into traps time and time and time again, and they've even freely admitted that they would absolutely love to exploit core gamers. The rather infamous remark from John Riccatello when it came down to gaming microtransactions is 6 hours into playing Battlefield and you run out of ammo in your clip and we ask you for $1 to reload, you're really not very price sensitive at that time. Yeah, well, I mean, it depends how you really take that, but he's not wrong. But the fact that he's even saying that is just pretty damn ridiculous. It's not the kind of thing you want to be saying in public, certainly not. And they have had a heavy DLC focus, a heavy microtransaction focus as of late. Dead Space 3 had microtransactions in it. A single-player title. So many DLC packs for Battlefield. It's pretty much been milked throughout the year. Admittedly, you can say exactly the same thing about Call of Duty, so they're hardly alone there, and arguably those expansion packs, those DLC packs for Battlefield were significantly better and significantly more content-rich than the stuff that you get for Call of Duty. But regardless, that's like saying that it's better to chop your own arm off than set it on fire and then chop it off. Their recent behavior in regards to SimCity, of course, is very, very worrying indeed. The notion that you can bring back a well-loved franchise and then exploit the hell out of people with it, as well as their rather curious new obsession with sponsored content. I don't know whether or not that's the kind of thing that I want anywhere near Star Wars games, let's be totally honest there. This is a mixed announcement. It's good to know that good development houses are getting licensed to Star Wars. One studio that has already produced one good Star Wars game and one middling MMO. Okay, cool. Willing to give them a third shot on that one. Visceral, I think they could make a great Star Wars game. I would like to see that M-rated Star Wars game. I really, really would. Maybe Disney don't let them do it. I have to wonder, what kind of flexibility do they have? How far can they go? Do they have to stick to the canon? Can they use the expanded universe? Are Disney okay with M-rated titles coming out of this? Will we see an M-rated Star Wars? Because the closest we, of course, have seen to that, really, has got to be Force Unleashed, which really wasn't all that. I mean, it was nearly there, don't get me wrong, but you want to see the full brutality of the Star Wars universe, you definitely do not see it in the current offering of games. As far as I'm concerned, you give Visceral the criminal underworld of Star Wars, which quite frankly is a wretched hive of scum and villainy, and you potentially have a really interesting game there. And then, of course, DICE, which, let's be honest, if DICE don't develop Battlefront 3 at this point, then I think they are out of their damn minds. I really, really do. It would be nothing but a huge windfall from the heavens of goodwill from people that have desperately wanted that game for a long, long time. And they're in the perfect position to make it as well. However, if they're going to be the studio that just keeps pumping out Battlefields every year, then we may very well not see that. I am waiting to see a turnaround from EA. I really, really am. I don't think they can keep going on down this path. There comes a point where you just become too evil. Activision reached that point a while ago, and then they were able to mend their ways quite significantly and bring themselves back into favor, and also avoid a lot of controversy. And that's something that EA has not been able to do at all. EA had a period where it looked like they were going really consumer-friendly, and then they deviated from that in a pretty big way, and now we have the current situation. But after the battering their shares took after the resignation of their CEO, I think we do need to see a different EA here, and this is an opportunity for them to do that. Whether or not they will pull that off, well, that's a different matter entirely. We will see. It's all speculation at this point. Speaking of EA, The Sims 4 has been announced, and they immediately said, no, 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 there won't be any always-on DRM. So EA put up an official post on its website that says, The Sims franchise is fueled by the passion and creativity of its millions of fans around the world. Their continued devotion to the franchise ignites the fire of creativity in the team at The Sims Studio, driving them to continually improve and innovate and blah, blah, blah. They also go on to say, of course, the franchise has sold over 150 million copies worldwide. It's actually kind of ridiculous. Now, the interesting, juicy information comes from a site called thesimshub.com, and an extended statement from EA that said that the actual experience itself would be single-player and offline. There is also an interesting part of the statement that said that Sims 4 encourages players to personalize their world with new and intuitive tools while offering them the ability to effortlessly share their creativity with friends and fans. Now, some people are taking that to mean that the game will actually have mod support. That's certainly not out of the ordinary there, but I think it's safe to say that the fact that they had to announce specifically that it would be a single-player offline experience is rather telling. It's telling in the sense that they know there was a hugely negative reaction to the always-on DRM of SimCity, regardless of their blustering and all their PR fluff that said, no, this is for your good. We need this. This makes a better experience here. This is good. This may be a sign of EA capitulating to, 1, gamers, and 2, common bloody sense. That would be nice to see, wouldn't it? I don't want to hate EA, but they give me so many reasons to. Every day. It's just depressing. It's like, trying to defend EA is an exercise in futility, because every time you do it, they'll just do something worse. You're like, oh my god. I guess you really shouldn't be defending any company, honestly, unless they pay you to do so. But let's be frank, SimCity was a goddamn disaster. EA made some stupid decisions with it, and as a direct result, they took a whipping in public. Unfortunately, it also sold a bunch of copies. So what I'm concerned about is that EA doesn't actually take the hint and decides, yeah, we'll just do that again. It sold a bunch of copies. I hope that gamers would just savvy up and just not buy it, because EA needs to be punished for that kind of behavior. They really, really do. But I think this is more a case of Maxa saying, we've got to say this, because if there's any speculation, this could be hugely damaging. And yeah, they would be right. I don't think Sims owners would be particularly happy if Sims 4 came out and then suddenly they couldn't play it on launch day. Absolutely not. There's a lot more casual gamers involved in that particular title that would be incredibly upset, I would imagine. They're not used to this kind of nonsense. They don't play MMOs and free-to-play games and lots of online multiplayer stuff. They just want to be able to play their new Sims game. And if they can't do that, you are going to be in trouble. Oh, man. Nothing can match the wrath of scorned casuals. And finally, on the same vein, we have the original SimCity creator calling EA server problems inexcusable. So this is an interesting one. Will Wright went on record to speak in a gamesindustry.biz interview, saying that he felt bad for the team, however, he could have predicted and kind of did predict that there would be a big backlash about the DRM stuff. He claims that it's still a good game and that he enjoyed playing it a lot, but that the actual situation was basically inexcusable, charging somebody $60 for a game that they actually cannot play. He said he could understand the outrage, and if he was a consumer buying the game, it would be exactly the same for him. He also went on to criticize Peter Moore's claim, the chief operating officer of EA, that the actual online system was not DRM. He said, people still want to argue about it, we can't be any clearer, it's not DRM. Will Wright's response to that was, I think people care if it doesn't work. If you can't play it on planes and stuff like that, I think there are some very valid concerns about it. Also, there is a perception. SimCity was in a very uncomfortable space. Was it a single-player game, or was it a multiplayer game? Well, I certainly don't agree that SimCity was a good game. It was actually one of the... I wouldn't even call it a bait and switch, I'd just call it a very misleading title that hides a lot of very, very poor decisions underneath the hood. And the smarter people that played it for longer than me realized that, yeah, there's something horribly wrong with this. Also wouldn't necessarily say that Will Wright is the best judge of good games, considering he also made Spore. Whoops. One way or the other, I can't disagree with his attitude when it comes down to the idea of perception. This is the most important thing. You can say that it's not DRM over and over again until the end of time. It doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't matter. What matters is it doesn't work. We don't care why you put it in the game. It didn't work. There is an expectation that games like SimCity can be played single player. There is not a desire to play SimCity with other people, and yet EA claimed that there was, and put forward this situation where you were almost forced to do so, and it didn't work when you tried anyway. So, you don't get out of that, I'm afraid. There is no wiggling and weaseling out of that one. You can talk about all the problems the game has. You can talk about the ridiculous nature of the agents in the game. You can talk about the completely broken traffic system. You can talk about the fact that someone managed to make a perfectly happy city with no utilities and no roads. My God. It's broken. It is a broken game, but you can talk about all of that and you can just get rid of it all because it doesn't matter. No one is going to find out if they can't get in the game to begin with. There you go, folks. There's your monthly roast of EA. Anyway, let's talk about the OC Remix track of the day, something a little bit more positive, shall we? Now, as far as I'm concerned, there are these tracks which are consistently remade and referenced, and all manner of cool stuff is done with them. However, they are often overplayed. One of those tracks has got to be the Dr. Wily stage from Mega Man 2. It's a pretty famous piece of music. It is an iconic video game theme from the NES era. And there are many attempts to remix it, and most of them don't do very well. I would especially say that ones that attempt to make it metal don't do all that well. There's a lot of metal remixes, there's a lot of rock remixes, just general guitar use when it comes to taking a video game track and doing a cover of it. There are very few people that can pull it off well. 6-2 Sounds is one of those people. This, as far as I'm concerned, is the best version of the Dr. Wily stage music that I've ever heard. I think it stands out as a really nice production. It's by 6-2 Sounds. It is called the Kutawari Arrival to the Light. Enjoy, ladies and gentlemen. Download it in the description below this video. Everything, of course, from that website is free. And I will see you next time.